and Jason from Aspect Security and the OWASP project are going to tell us about something to do with preventing cross-site scripting. Trivia question of the moment: what does OWASP stand for? No, don't shout it.
Oh, he earned it.
Okay, guy, look out.
It's good stuff. It's an excellent thing.
Oh yeah, the feedback site, feedback to shmoocon.org.
All right, so can you guys hear me? Can you hear me without me bending over? Perfect. So we're going to be having dinner across the street if anybody's interested. It's 7 at the Lebanese Tavern, getting a bunch of technical people together. So join us if you would. My name is Arshan Abir-Siagi. I'm the Director of Research for Aspect Security. With me, as always, is Jason Lee, Senior Application Security Engineer, right, at Aspect. Also an OWASP volunteer. So we're going to talk about the Anti-Samy project. There's a lot of cool talks going on here at Shmoocon, a lot of them dealing with lower level stuff. But we're going to move it way up the stack. We're going to talk about application layer stuff. We're going to talk about alert document.cookie, which at the beginning I admit is very uninteresting, but as soon as you get into all the different things that you can do when you have a creative environment like the browser, some interesting stuff can happen. So if you get your app reviewed by most consultancies, they'll say, if they find XSS, they'll say, well, you should HTML encode all your output. And we've heard that before. So that's actually wrong. So what you should do applies, what you should do is based on many different factors. If you HTML encode input that ends up in an event handler, it does nothing because the browser will decode it. If you inject, if dangerous user input ends up being reflected inside of a JavaScript block, HTML encoding will do nothing. So there's lots of different problems with that just idea of just HTML encode everything. So one of the fundamental problems with it is it destroys rich markup. So if a user wants to have something in bold tags and you HTML encode it, then you're literally going to see bold tags in their, when their comment is reflected or when their input is reflected. And this is just not very, comforting to the user. We need to allow rich content because rich content is really it's one of the cornerstones of Web 2.0. The user makes the site. So Anti-Samy is going to allow us to do that. It's a rich input validation tool. It's a way of allowing your users to submit rich content to the site without exposing yourself to cross-site scripting attacks. All right, there's a bunch of information about me. So Samy, a lot of people probably know Samy. Samy was the guy who hacked MySpace. Now, when you talk about hacking at the application layer, you usually mean you're abusing the app in some way. You're not traditionally rooting it. So just some background here. The difference between Arshan and Samy. I'm absolutely taller. I guess we'd have to find the right people to gauge on these other things. But Samy, he's a really interesting guy. He's a developer, a very smart developer, who's kind of tangentially aware of the web application security field. But he's just a really smart developer who just took a dump on MySpace one night because he was bored. So stored cross-site scripting, just really quickly we'll go over this. Stored cross-site scripting is when I submit some input to the server, and that server gets reflected to other people. And at the time when it gets delivered to those other people, it gets interpreted by the browser as JavaScript. And if you can execute JavaScript in somebody else's browser, you can do a whole lot of bad stuff. You can redirect them to malware. You can steal their session information. Send them to a phishing site or an embarrassing site to your company. Lots of different stuff you can do. So cross-site scripting is real bad. So MySpace, and again, it shows you how long ago this attack was. I mean, people were still using MySpace at the time. So the idea was MySpace wanted to allow you to, mark up your content and make your page all ugly and have black background and all that kind of stuff that all the goth kids wanted to do. And they didn't want you to allow JavaScript at the same time. So Samy was, he wanted to change he wanted to change his profile so that when his girlfriend visited his page, it would change her relationship status from in a relationship to in a hot relationship. So this is a very innocent goal, but by the time he accomplished that goal, or by the time he realized he could execute JavaScript in a browser, he changed his goals to be much more hilarious, in my opinion. So actually, Sammy created a stored cross-site scripting warp. So when you viewed Sammy's profile, it would copy the infection from Sammy's profile into your profile, and it would add Sammy to your heroes list and your friends list, and it propagated through that mechanism. So this is the problem I wanted to solve, was how do you allow rich input without exposing yourself to cross-site scripting? And MySpace put a lot of work, and I'm sure they put a whole lot of money into figuring out how to do that with the blacklist. So they blacklisted all kinds of JavaScript words and some words that could be used in malicious code, and it was very good, as good as a blacklist can be. But because it was a blacklist, not surprisingly, Sammy found eventually a few holes in it. So he put his worm up there, and 18 hours in, he had 1 million friends. So blacklisting is just wrong. It's error prone. It's not high assurance. It requires a lot of maintenance because attacks change over time. So here we have an example of a blacklist that's got, and you might think this is kind of contrived, but I review code for a living, and let me tell you that this is actually a lot better than most of the blacklists I've seen. It's terrible, but it's something, which is better than the nothing that's usually out there. So like I said, typically when you go to when a consultancy comes in, they'll say, okay, you need to HTML encode all your output instead of having this bad blacklist. But again, that doesn't really work. It jolts the user, and doesn't actually protect you from XSS in most cases. So do sites really need HTML from users? We're of the opinion that they really do. Anywhere from user comments to eBay postings, all kinds of stuff like that, CMS. So we think it's unavoidable that users are going to be sharing code. And the web is all about sharing code. So we got this really bad situation where HTML is really bad mashup of code and data, people trying to validate this stuff in really awkward and ineffective ways. And what we have is a terrible disaster right now. I mean, 95% of the sites, web applications that we look at are vulnerable to cross-site scripting on their first review. So Anti-Samy, it's an API. So the API is based on a policy file. So you tell it which rich input you want to take from a user, and it filters everything else out. So this is a whitelist approach, right? Because we're defining what we want, and we're throwing away the rest. So you can have a policy file that says, I want bold tags, italic tags, and underline tags, and throw everything else out. So it was funded by an OWASP Spring of Code grant. It was kind of a nothing project, and then it turned into something really big. Like I said, it's a positive or a whitelist approach. So we actually end up learning some interesting things. We thought, well, even if we stripped out all the JavaScript, what would be the worst thing you could do if you could submit any kind of HTML or style sheets to a site and have them take that, even though it wasn't JavaScript? What was the worst thing you could do? So we'll talk about some of that. Don't need to applause. It would be the nicest thing to do, but okay. See, all you have to do is ask. So the goals for Anti-Samy provide high assurance. So of course, I don't mean high assurance in the way that formal methods people would preach to you about. I just mean high assurance for the web. So portability was very important. So the magic of Anti-Samy is in the policy files. There's nothing really that complex about the code that we wrote or the libraries we use. It's all about the policy file. So the policy file is just XML, and you can absorb that from any other language. We've got ports in .NET, and we've got a Python port that's being worked on. So we want to have one policy file, and any language can use it. So we want it to be able to provide friendly feedback, able to just make it work. So this is just like my hippie nature coming through. When you go to a site and you type in input, and it doesn't like the input, what does it say? Well, it just says there was an error, or we didn't like that, or something. It gives you a very terse message because the application is treating you as a potential attacker. Now, while this might be the most prudent thing and might make the bearded security guy really happy, it's not actually that useful because it jolts your users. So being able to just make it work like Tim Gunn, that really helps your user base out. So we'll give you error messages that tell you exactly why it didn't work, and we'll give you, rather it's not a binary thing. It's not like pass, fail. We'll take what's good out, and we'll keep it, and then the bad things, we'll enumerate what's bad about it, and then we just won't keep those things. But we're able to just make it work. We never fail. So not all JavaScript is intentional cross-site scripting. Users copy and paste code from each other. They see something on a site they like, they copy it, they paste it, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're malicious. And you're jolting your users. I'm going to repeat this because people just don't realize the effect. You really upset your users when you just flatly reject their input. All right, I'm married, so that worked at the last conference. Okay, so the first step. He told me he was going to do it. I didn't believe him. I didn't know your aim was so terrible. So the first step. So Anti-Samy's got a very reliable framework that other tools that have since duplicated, or other tools have developed individually. So there's a process. There's different types of XSS attacks. There's XSS attacks that are based on fragmentation, and confusing a blacklist or confusing a parser into inexplicably or unexpectedly processing dangerous input through. And there's based on holes in a blacklist. There's attacks based on those holes. So the first thing we need to do is get the input into a predictable format. And the only way to do that is to turn it into a DOM tree in XML. So the first thing we do, if we looked on the left here, we have a busted HTML that the user sent us in. Right? So they have a div that they have a null byte in there. They have extra brackets, and the thing is just all banged up. So what we did was we leveraged some of the work done by a lot of groups in the early 90s when the web first came out, or when the web first started to take off. A lot of companies built tools and APIs to sanitize HTML. There were just lots of uses for that type of tool. So we leveraged some of that, and we leveraged a tool called Nico HTML to take some busted piece of input and just sanitize it. So what I get from that object is not a string. Nico gives me a DOM, an actual DOM object. So we're looking at the right here, what's the representation of that. So that's an abstract tree. The body tag is at the top, and then there's a div and a bold, etc. So now that I have a DOM to work with, I can apply the rules from my XML policy. So now we step through, according to the policy, and rip out the things that aren't specifically, explicitly set to be there. So think about the different attack surface that sites expose themselves to. So /dot only allows you to have comments, and they only allow you to have underline, bold tag, and links, anchors. So obviously they have a much smaller attack surface than, say, an eBay or a MySpace, where they allow you to put in all different kinds of stuff. Okay, so what you should do is figure out what you want from your users. Do you want the MySpace experience, or do you want the /dot experience? And if you want the /dot experience, you take the /dot policy file that we provide for you as a template, customize it to be your own, you maybe rip out a few tags or add a few in, and then you're done. Right? And again, just realize that your attack surface is built upon how much you allow. All right, so we don't have to get into the in-depth XML of the policy file. Just realize we built it in an efficient way, so you never have to redefine anything twice. But if you're interested in that, we can talk about it. So I spent a lot of time on this slide, so I expect everybody to pay close attention. So we have this DOM here. So this is the DOM that's spit out by Nico, and then we're going to go through our policy file to see, to see what we should do with it. So if we encounter the head tag, we look up the head, tag from the policy file, and there's a rule here, which is actually the default rule if there's no tag rule, and that's filter. So we see that it's filter, so we take that tag out. Next, we have a div, and the action for that tag is to validate. So it can also optionally have an attribute named align. So we go to the image, and the image has a, yeah. It's not going as well as I'd hoped. Okay. So there's an image tag. So here you can see that we've defined an attribute for the image tag that, it's what's called source. If that source tag that source attribute is invalid, then we remove the tag entirely. It wouldn't make sense if we just filtered the image source attribute and kept the image tag, because that would be meaningless. So we have two regular expressions that would allow this a value to be passed. So we have an on-site URL and an off-site URL regex. So if it passes either of those, it's allowed through. So we follow this same kind of pattern, and I'm not going to go through each one of these, but there's an anchor that points to JavaScript links, so that's obviously not allowed according to the policy file. So we trim that node, and then we propagate up. So again, we do all this kind of stuff, and it follows that pattern. So at the end, what we have now is this cleaned up DOM. So now that we have a DOM representation, we can now go back to the land of strings and HTML. So now we take this DOM, and this is what it looks like. It looks like a string. So now we've got what the user sent in, but cleaned up without any of the rich markup that we didn't want. So when you invoke Anti-Samy, you have these 4 objects that get returned to you. How long it took to do, the error messages, the HTML as a string, and the HTML as a DOM object in case you wanted to do anything fancy with it yourself. All right, so this API is enforced across the different implementations. So pretty much the same. This might be the Java syntax, but pretty much the same for anything else. So if you wanted to use this, what would you do? You throw a jar file into your class path, or in .NET you would throw the DLL, whatever. You would take one of the custom policy or one of the template policy files like /dot, eBay, or MySpace. You tailor it to your site, whatever your rules are going to be, and then you're done. You add a few lines of code to your app, and then you're pretty much finished. So look at the API here. We get a request parameter called profile, and then we call scan on the profile, and then we do something with the results. So really absurdly easy to use. Simplicity is key for security components. If you have something that's hard to use, developers aren't going to use it properly. They're going to misuse it in some way. So really absurdly easy. All right, so we wanted a peer-reviewed, time-tested solution for validating HTML because your RSS feeder needs this type of technology. All the different types of Web 2.0 bit shifting, data moving components are going to need this, right? And when I first started this project, a lot of people told me that the idea was stupid, that it wasn't possible to do right because it's just too difficult. When actually as soon as we built errors, we went on the web and we found that other people had, they had thought about some of these things, and there were a lot of people that were close to doing this right. So you can say, okay, well, that doesn't stop CSRF. Well, I never said it was going to stop CSRF, to be defensive about it. But let's say that you have you have an image tag on your site, or you allow images in your profile. Well, you can go into your policy file and say, well, I want to remove the ability for users to host images from other sites, or prevent users from supplying links that point to other sites. There's a whole regex policy set of rules in there. So you can literally define exactly what you want. So this is really shifting the burden onto one developer to write what the rules are for everybody. And then across your organization, you have complete control over what markup is allowed. So it's a lot of work maybe for me to come up with this policy file, for Jason and I to come up with this policy file, but we've already done all that. So all you do is just tailor it a little bit, and then you're finished. So interesting things that we learned while coming up with Anti-Samy, and some things that we learned along the way. Can anybody spot the vulnerability in that regex? So let's say that you are doing a code review, and don't worry about the regex tag around it or anything, but can anybody spot what's wrong with that regex? Ampersand to backslash. So what is that actually saying? What is that actually doing? Instead of the dash character. Right, so I think somebody over there said pretty much the same thing. So the ampersand character in ASCII is something low, and then the dash character, or the @ whatever comes after that is very high. So anything between those two ASCII ranges will actually be accepted by this, because if we had escaped the dash, then it would have been interpreted by the regex engine as, you know, the join two character sets together. So we, in one of our rules, we had this problem, and it happened to not screw us, but we were very close, and we barely got away with it. We happened to have two characters that were close to each other in the character range. Hijacking a co-browse window with target. So there's lots of applications. We don't see them on, you know, the web in general for, you know, mass user sites, but we tend to see sites that have a little helper window that's always around. All right, so that little helper window is just a named window that you can control with user content. So what we have here is a link that I would put in a comment, right? And then when somebody else clicked on that link, it would actually change the href of the small window, of, you know, the window that they think is, you know, in the application that they trusted. And because oftentimes the URL is not shown in that window, it's just like a, you know, just a blank box. They're not really going to notice that that was you know, that's been hijacked. And then you can have your evil code that replaced that open up a new window back to good.com that was the same size. So you got to be careful with that target attribute. So people were sending us information on the mailing list saying, you know, why is target disallowed, and this is why. Question?
Wouldn't that work also with iframes?
Wouldn't that?
Target an iframe that way?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no different. And we also happen to find a bunch of vulnerabilities in Nico, the library that we use for HTML parsing. So we found a bunch of things that caused it to go haywire or go into infinite loops and eventually cause out-of-memory exceptions. So SAX parsers are kind of scary. All right, known vulnerabilities. Well, there's not any that we know of, but that doesn't mean they're not out there. I have high confidence that our rules are good, but of course we can't give any guarantee. But we have a lot of smart people that are banging on it, and, you know, they're not telling us anything. So we always want more people to test it. I mean, the people that write mod security, the people that write all these different tools, PHP IDS, they want you to test their stuff all the time. Don't just assume it works. I mean, without that community actually trying to hack it, you know, we don't have that much assurance. Yeah, so really nothing that great. TX caught me being stupid on some debug stuff. So why won't this catch US ASCII? Well, because anytime that your security mechanism is living on a different planet than the input that comes in, I mean, US ASCII just looks like text to me. It just looks like alphanumerics and pluses and dashes. So Anti-Samy is not going to catch that. So that's a response header problem. All right, so I thought it was, you know, when I first did the project, I thought it was kind of crappy that, you know, MySpace and eBay and Google, they all had their own types of solutions to this problem, but there was no free API out there to do it. So that was one of our goals here. Well, his whole deck was like that, so that's why I did that. So where are we at time-wise? Okay, great. So we're going to do a few demos. And the first demo is we're going to throw like 10 things from RSnake's cheat sheet right at Anti-Samy. And you'll see that it's already defended against by default. JavaScript, I'm not that worried about getting through on Anti-Samy. So this is a test page that's actually available on my site. Since I'm wearing the Aspect shirt, I don't want to give out the domain name for my site.
So you want to explain how the page works?
Yeah, so the page we're on is basically an Anti-Samy test harness. So anything you put into this box will be reflected on the next page. So right now, Jason is putting in some HTML with a, you know, his basic script tag, and he's going to, you know, update his profile on this fake face space page. And you can see that it got through because he wasn't using any Anti-Samy profile. So if he changes to you know, one of the Anti-Samy profiles, he'll put that in, he'll hit update profile. All right, so we have this helpful message. It says, we encountered some errors with your profile. The script tag is not allowed for security reasons. This tag should not affect the display of input. Now, I didn't anticipate getting a lot of international support right away, but shockingly, people from all over the world were hopped right on board, and they said, oh yeah, we need this, and they said, can you internationalize, and sat down for 2 hours, and it really wasn't that difficult to do, but now we've got internationalized error messages. What's that? Except for the header, yeah. Oh, the headers, that's not part of the API. All right, so XSS, JavaScript, we're not that worried about. But there's a lot of things besides JavaScript that you need to worry about. There's a lot of HTML and style sheets that can do bad things. So these attacks aren't brand new. I'm not claiming any novelty to these. So the first thing that has bitten a lot of companies, especially MySpace, is the absolute div overlay. So this is when you create a div and you change the overlay property, and you set the overlay of your code to overlay something else on the page, like the menu or the logo of the page. So what we're going to do Jason's going to show us the attack. All right, he's going to hit update profile. And now, since we weren't defending against this attack in the policy file, we submitted no JavaScript to make this happen, right? This is all style sheets. So now he's going to hit login, and as you can see up top, we went to evil.site and passed in our credentials. So it would obviously be a little smoother in real life. They would simply overlay the position of a login form or of one menu button, or they would make it a lot smoother. But that now proves the idea that we can do a lot of malicious stuff with style sheets, especially with absolute div. So now Jason's going to use the fixed policy file, get us some English error messages so we understand them. So now this is the fix. The reason that there's so much space is because the attacker put in a bunch of BRs and he made the height really high. So again, but we're not taking over the whole page. You could tune your policy file so that they couldn't make their height or width 100%. In fact, you can make your policy file so that they couldn't put any style sheets at all. Again, totally up to you to do whatever you want to do with the API. All right, so the next one is a div hijack. Now, I haven't seen anybody else do this, so I may be claiming some novelty here, but I really don't care that much. So this is when we take a div that was already existing on the page, and we redefine it. So we call it a div collaborating. We've called similar things called different things. So, but anyway, there's all of these sections of the pages are they're all defined under a name. So the first one is called logo, I think. So is that right? Header. So when Jason's going to put in some attack code that we came up with, that's going to clobber that style sheet definition, and it's going to overwrite that header with something that we control. So again, no JavaScript is being sent here. So as you can see, all at the top, it says all your base R belong to us. Obviously, that's not the logo that they wanted us to see. No JavaScript. So again, this is a difficult problem to fix because you have to somehow tell Anti-Samy which divs you want to protect. So you could do something like where you tell Anti-Samy any div that starts with MySpace _ all those are protected. Those are the ones to prevent from hijacking. So this would just be a simple naming convention you put in among your developers to make sure all their divs start with MySpace. I don't know why I'm giving MySpace all this free press. All right, so our last demo is something that is the worst of all because it doesn't pass in any JavaScript, yet it somehow fires off JavaScript. So this is the real all your base are belong to us attack. So we insert a base tag, and the base tag simply tells the browser any relative resource that you encounter after this base tag you should get from this site. And obviously this is an attacker's dream, but you won't see this on RSnake's cheat sheet. You won't see it on many people's cheat sheets. So it isn't used a whole lot, and IE7 started not honoring the base tag in the body. It only honors it in the head. And there's some other things that make it not a great vector, but it's still an edge case that works a lot of times. So we put in the base href here, and if we look at the bottom, we've hijacked the image resource that was referenced relatively at the bottom there. So What else is referenced through relative path? JavaScript. Right? Script, source equals whatever. So now we can hijack all those and get them from the bad guy instead. So in our final demo, we're going to show that we stop that by disallowing the base tag. So I think a lot of people got lucky with this base tag. So when I first found this, I went to eBay and I went to MySpace and I went to all the big people who are considered to have pretty good solutions. And they all, I swear, just happened to be referencing all their stuff fully qualified. If they hadn't been, you could steal all their relative resources. But eBay, I swear they just got lucky. All right. So that's Anti-Samy. So this is an API that's been around for a year or something. So we've got a couple different languages. We're up to Java version 1.3. .NET is still pre 1.0, but we're getting there. The Python port just started. So we're hoping to make this thing available on any API. PHP has a great program that it sort of does what Anti-Samy does, but not really. It's called HTML Purifier. It's a very good solution. So if you're a PHP guy, use that.
And Arshan, I just want to mention, when you said Java 1.3, we're up to version 1.3, Anti-Samy 1.3, not
Yes.
Java.
Java.
1.3. We're Java 1.4, 5, 6.
Yeah, whatever Java version you want, as long as it lasts 10 years. So we're releasing a new tool today that's built on Anti-Samy, and it's called Scrubber. Scrubber was developed by Aspect Security, my company, and it was donated to OWASP. So Scrubber is an interesting little tool that I just went through this half-hour spiel about what Anti-Samy is. It simply goes through every row, every column in your database, and it runs Anti-Samy on that column. So this is the only way today that you can really get visibility into your database to look for stored cross-site scripting attacks. If you have a consultancy come to your place and they find stored XSS, you can patch the vulnerability, but that's not to say that attacks haven't already been stored. And also, not all your input comes from the web. In a real application, data comes from message queues, FTPs, direct connects, all kinds of wacky places. So it's an excellent tool for getting that visibility inside your database. So we're going to do a demo in a second, but I want to make sure people know what Scrubber can't do. Scrubber can't find any DOM-based cross-site scripting attack. Or attribute-based cross-site scripting. So if somebody puts in as an attack vector, double quote, space, on mouse over equals whatever. Anti-Samy is not going to catch that because it just looks like text. Right? Anti-Samy is not a good cross-site scripting detector. It's a rich input policy compliance tool. Right? I can make sure something the user sends in isn't the rich input that you want. That doesn't make it a good XSS detector. NoScript is a great tool for that. PHP IDS, those things are great at that detection phase. Anti-Samy is okay at it. So we're looking at maybe re-implementing PHP IDS in Java, which ends up with a funny name, or maybe not funny. Anyway, so it also can't fix your vulnerabilities, whatever. It's just strictly about the database. It's about getting into your database and going through each row and each column. Or you can just say, I want to scan this table and look for vulnerabilities there. So I have a quick demo. You have oh, perfect. Oh, yes. Oh, you can see the whole screen. All right. So Jason's going to go to click on MySQL. He's going to change that first line to localhost. And he's going to change the database name to test. And my MySQL is admin password. And I don't allow connections from anything other than localhost. Oh, but the username is root, and the password is admin. All right, so I'm going to try to connect to my local database here. And where did you run this out of? This the desktop icon? Okay. All right, so I'm not 100% sure this is the version we're releasing, but Jason's just going to scan the entire database because it's just a small database I cooked up. And he's going to start scan. And there's a status bar, but you can't really see it below it. And then it generated another window over here onto my screen. All right, so this resolution is awful. So we only scan one table. There's only one table in the database. There's only 6 rows. So Jason's going to click on foo. And what we have here is this is all the data. These are all the rows that had tainted data, things that we detected messages on. So basically, it's just a wrapper for Anti-Samy. So Jason's going to click on this, that first red one, that's right. And then it shows you what's going to be left afterwards. So the original value is open bracket or close bracket, script, alert, close script, bracket, bracket. So if you filter out that script, what are you left with? You're left with 3 encoded brackets. All right, so this is exactly what we expect. Now Jason can click on fix. Did I do anything? Yeah, so if you double click on it, you can, go ahead, get information about, you can also click on why was this flagged, and that'll tell you the rules. If you double click, it's kind of the same thing. Yeah, this is kind of an old version, but the real version is up on the Scrubber site that we're going to really get it out to all the blogs and all the feeds and make sure everybody knows about it. Question?
Well, no, it's just more of a comment. It strikes me this is sort of a brilliant remediation for the trend in the past year of all these people going through and doing SQL injection on all the little mom and pop sites. So
Yes.
somebody puts up something where it blocks sites, does SQL injection, and you have blah, 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 hospital site JavaScript. I mean, it's one of those things where you Google for it, you'll find 1 million, 5 million results or something
Yes.
like that. Have you guys given any thought to trying to reach out outside?
Thank you for reminding me about a very key point. So Scrubber is SCRUBBR, which is actually a play on Scrawler. Scrawler was a tool that HP released last year after the ASP Rocks mass SQL injection cross-site scripting worm. So this is our answer. So they released a tool for free that allowed you to see if your own site would get hit with it. So we're releasing a tool now that lets you kind of see if you were hit with it on the database side. So yeah, that's exactly the point. I don't know. I'm not sure what you mean by reach out, but I mean
It's just, you're sitting here at a security conference, working for a security company, telling other security people about it.
yes.
Is aspect
Go
of
preach.
loss for anybody doing anything to reach out outside? I mean, me being a
It's really hard.
turn around and try and do that.
It,
but
yeah, like
that I'm just asking if there's any plan on anyone's front to do that.
I'll just say it's really hard to get into a developer conference. It's really hard to get developers' attention. There's only Jeremiah and Chris Schiffler. There's a few people who've penetrated that market, but really,
I'm very familiar. I'm being devil's advocate with this question, but to me, this is even above and beyond developers. This is sort of like mom and pop who set up something with front page
Sure.
and various other things. I mean, that's where you see a lot of these is, community church bus service and things like that.
well, thank God, because then I don't have to support Oracle, which is a nightmare, right? Because they don't have 10 grand for a license.
But I mean, is there any formal OWASP plan to sort of do that as an outreach, or?
I mean, I imagine we'll market it just like we market everything else, which is as much as we can.
I'm just curious. I mean, this is.
Yeah, this is really, there's no,
For problems here, but it's a brilliant solution because this is something you can give to somebody with very little technical knowledge, and it could just basically pop up a flag saying your database is screwed. Press
Yeah.
this button to fix.
well, here's the thing. If you run this tool against your production database and you hit that fix button, you are stupid, right? I mean, anybody who changes production data with a tool they didn't write is crazy.
But again,
So,
I'm talking about mom and pop here.
yeah, mom and pop can change it, and we have very big disclaimers, but
Millions of websites that deal with this sort of stuff, and most of them are people
yeah, small.
who have no knowledge at all.
Mhm.
And it gets to the whole idea of like, do you build a worm that hatches a worm type of question. But just, I'm curious to know if there's any plans to try and market this outside the security community. Because
Hey, we'll try.
we can talk to ourselves till we're blue in the face.
If
but we're
if
not the people who need
if you got ideas, well, well, I don't know. Sometimes these markets kind of, or the demand creates itself. Like we didn't market Anti-Samy very much, and oh my God, thousands of downloads like right away. So I mean, we hope for some of that magic. But I was talking to Peleus. I butchered your name. Sorry. I was talking to him earlier, and he was talking about going through his own database. He had to do a bunch of select statements, and it's a very error-prone approach, right? Because you're searching for different attack strings, and you're not really searching through every field. So yeah, if you try to do this manually, you're very high likelihood you're going to miss a lot. So, and there's going to be false positives for sure, because if let's say you wrap your email address in brackets, so then it's joe.schmo@gmail.com, and that's in a bracket. Well, that looks like a tag, right? So Anti-Samy is going to say, sorry, I don't recognize that tag. I'm a whitelister, and it's going to throw it out. And it's going to raise an exception. So there's going to be false positives, but we think getting this visibility is so important that we think as is, it's very valuable. And like I said, in the future, we may switch out the engines and make it something that's more, less prone to false positives or catches more stuff. But that's where we are today. And so, like I said, works with MySQL, or maybe I didn't mention this. It works with MySQL, SQL Server, and Oracle. MySQL and SQL Server, we've thoroughly tested fixing and reading, and it does a really good job. Oracle, we've done a lot of testing on reading, but we couldn't do a lot of testing on writing or trying to fix. So if anybody's got resources that allow them to do some testing for us, we'd love that. All right, thanks to all these people. All these people helped us with either getting the project up, getting it in different languages, or helping us with administrating all this stuff, submitting patches and finding bugs and stuff. Also, Gareth Hayes found a few things. I forgot to list them up here. That's it. Anybody have any questions? We have not. I mean, we're like, a boutique consultancy. We have like 30 people. Oh, the question was, have you tried it against Sybase? And one of the things I discovered was that there is no such thing as Anti-SQL. So at the beginning, I was like, I'm going to use Anti-SQL, and it's going to be portable across all platforms. That's a joke. I mean, Anti-SQL is a horrible rumor. So no, we haven't tested with Sybase or DB2 or any other kind of product.
I don't know much about style sheets, but to what extent is it possible to obfuscate stuff with a style sheet so that a tag only becomes apparent after some degree of evaluation?
Unfortunately, you can't change the DOM, I don't think. Style sheets can change the rendering of how DOM is shown in the UI, but I don't think a style sheet can change actually the layout of the document object model.
At least not without cross-site scripting. Like
Yeah, you would need JavaScript to do that.
What other languages are you guys looking to put this into? Ruby or Perl?
Good question. Ruby has absolutely for some reason, no Ruby developers are interested in this kind of thing. We have had zero input from Ruby. One guy came up to me after a conference and said, yeah, I'd really like to do it, then I never heard from him again. But Python, .NET, Java, that's where we are today. But we're totally happy to go anywhere else. We'd be thrilled, in fact, if anybody from those communities joined in.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but the thing about style sheets is so much is it can't necessarily change the DOM, but it can arrange things visually so much. And the point is, if you don't have someone who's a tech-savvy user, it doesn't really matter because they're not going to analyze the DOM. They're going to look at
No.
the screen.
Yeah, that's what Anti-Samy is supposed to help you do, is be that expert for you.
Yeah, but by injecting, just to explain, that by injecting style sheets or style changes to a user who is not doing this sort of stuff, you can totally redraw the website on the screen. If you look at the DOM, something's fishy, but you can point objects way off screen so that you can't see them at all and totally rewrite the web page if you can inject style sheet on. So you may not actually be changing the DOM, but visually you can make a totally different web page if you can get new style sheet on.
That's right. Questions? All right. I'll be here for any questions afterwards. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Oh.
Nice catch, Mr. Bud. Dude, it's on tape. It's like this. It's just like a rubber band gun. There you go.
I thought it was some kind of magic. It's right in the heart. That's what I was gonna have. That's what I thought was gonna happen on Inauguration Day.
Here, toss me the pointer.